Hi everyone. This is a recap of our winter meeting for 2019. We talked about being a trauma-informed ministry and how to be trauma sensitive. Then just a little bit about some specific things that we are doing at Kid Central to be sensitive to trauma and to be proactive about behaviors that come from trauma. So first thing we want to talk about, what is trauma? We got into understanding a little bit more about trauma last fall when we attended a webinar about trauma. And trauma occurs when a person is overwhelmed by something outside of their control. There are 3 different kinds of trauma. There's an acute trauma, which is a one-time, single happening event, so maybe something like a car accident or the death of a loved one. There's chronic trauma, which is repeated and prolonged. An example of this would be abuse or neglect. Then there's complex trauma, which is varied and multiple traumatic events. Here are some examples of things that can cause trauma: natural disasters, physical abuse, sexual abuse, medical illness, injury, procedures, community violence, neglect, grief, being a refugee, experiencing war or loss, being the victim of a crime, and toxic stress. Here's a diagram of our brains that I'll use to illustrate how trauma works in the brain. So this lower section of your brain is considered your survival brain. Triune brain theory says that there are 3 parts to a brain. This bottom part is often called reptilian brain. Some people call it lizard brain. It's the part of you that you don't have to consciously do anything. It keeps you functioning. So breathing, temperature, keeping your heart pumping, balance, your coordination, those sorts of things. This middle section is the limbic system, which is responsible for the way that you experience the world through your senses and how you feel about things. It's how you're able to enjoy things. The top part of your brain is called the neocortex. This is the part of the brain that is conscious. Your thinking, your behavior, your language, ability to communicate, and good decision making all comes from this top part of your brain. Within the limbic system is a part of your brain called the amygdala. This is a regulator, and when it experiences trauma, it sets off an alarm in your brain, which is telling the rest of the brain to shut down non-essential functioning. This whole part of your brain is considered non-essential. Pieces of this part are considered non-essential, and this part takes over. So you're relying on your instinct, and it pushes you into a survival mode. Another piece in this limbic system is the hippocampus, which is responsible for storage of memory. This part is considered non-essential as well when you're in a traumatic situation. So memories may be somewhat formed, but they are not stored necessarily correctly. And this is why people who are survivors of traumatic situations maybe don't have the best memory, or their memories seem unreliable. Well, it's because their brain shut that part of it down. When your brain is experiencing trauma over and over and over again, you've probably heard of fight or flight. There are actually 3 responses from your system to trauma: fight, flight, or freeze. And each of them comes with their own defenses about how your brain helps you take care of your body. And when you experience something over and over and over again, it forms a deeper path. So essentially, your amygdala alarm becomes stuck on, and memories are stuck in the hippocampus, not being stored correctly. This also means that your amygdala is incredibly sensitive to trauma, so almost anything can set it off. Something as simple as seeing a color, smelling, hearing certain words or certain smell, a lack of control in a situation, or seeing someone who reminds you of a situation that you've been in. That can trigger fight, flight, or freeze just as much as a real traumatic situation would. You can take a look at this chart. It shows the effects of trauma on our system, I like to show you a couple examples of responses, and then I will make this available via a link for you. This is specifically for people in the nursery, but you can see how, say, an 11-year-old child has built upon their fight, flight, or freeze over the years, and what happens as they respond to trauma. Okay, so this chart will show you a little bit of what a developmentally appropriate behavior would be for a triggering event, but then it also shows you the 3 kinds of responses that could happen if a child has experienced trauma. So, for instance, let's look here at 1 to 3 years. Unexpected changes in routines, transitions, strangers, crowds, anger, real or perceived. So, a thing that would be developmentally appropriate would be being easily frustrated, being afraid of a stranger, engaging in parallel play rather than group play, so wanting to play alongside someone but not with them. For a child who is experiencing trauma, they may isolate themselves from others, refuse to participate, run away, walk away. That's flight. For fight, they might exhibit aggressive behaviors, pushing, biting. They might cling to the adults, have tantrums, have disruptive behavior. And freeze, the child might check out, unresponsive, appearing not to hear or understand, difficult with learning activities. So you can check out this chart on your own. I suggest you check out Suggested Trauma-Sensitive Care, how to deal with that. But as I was reading this chart, it just made me think of how many times have we been in a situation with one of the kids who is acting out, and they're trying fight. They're having a tantrum, and then they try to run away. They try flight. Then when you've finally caught up to them, and you're getting down on their level and you're saying, hey, I just want to check out what's going on here. Like, can you help me understand? They're totally checked out. They're unresponsive. Their head goes down. They don't want to make eye contact with you. And it's not that they're being disrespectful. It's that they can't. I mean, think about this, that their brain is totally shut down to survival mode. It's as if the trauma is happening over again. So this is why I say, think about the question, what is the need behind the behavior? If something is happening, and that kid has trauma in their life, trauma in their past, or ongoing trauma now, a lot of times fear or anger, they hide as each other. So if a child has a lot of outbursts, there's probably some unmet need behind that. Here are a few things that we have already started to do or will be starting soon that are trauma-sensitive tools. Don't be afraid to use the things that we're learning in webinars and workshops by doing your own research. It's helpful if we're able to use the same language associated around it, so that's why I'm listing these things out for you. And we'll go a little bit deeper on Bump Hill Mountain in a minute. So these are some of the tools that we have started using. Bump Hill Mountain is about self-awareness and being able to identify your problems and your reactions. Zones of regulation we haven't started yet, but it uses color for kids to understand emotional regulation, helping to move themselves to healthier zones. In the elementary kids area, we use whole brain teaching, which you will hear the kids yelling, class, class, yes, yes. Feel free to use those things in other areas. It's okay in your own classroom, in the nursery upstairs, if you want to teach them to say yes, yes after class, class. That's attention getting. We can use the rules from our whole brain teaching, follow directions quickly, those sorts of things. We're providing language and consistent language to our expectations for the kids. Again, asking what is the need behind the behavior, which I know is hard to do when you're in the room full of 10 kids and 4 of them are having behaviors at that time. But be patient and don't afraid to go slowly in working through things. Use cueing and presence. You being proximal to a kid helps them know that you're there, but you're not necessarily breathing down their neck too much. And then as much as the time that you can prompt them about what's going to happen, give them a schedule, keep it consistent, you can provide cueing. So another example of cueing would be saying, okay, well, I see that Sarah is sitting very nicely and quietly. And let's see, can we all sit like Sarah? Oh, yes, we can, that kind of thing. The last two are things that you can do after the behavior has already escalated to the point of kids needing to be separated from other kids if there is like outbursts or they're causing too much distraction in their classroom. The first thing I'm calling a 1 yes. This is when you're sitting side by side with a kid, you've gotten down to their level. They are totally shut down though. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to talk about why they got kicked out of their classroom. They don't want to talk about what's going on in their feelings, anything like that. You need to start that conversation with yes or no answers. And your goal is to get them to say 1 yes. Because after you've gotten them to say yes to one of your questions, you've already diffused something in them. They're going to start turning more towards you. The best yes or no question that I can think of: would you like something to drink? Would you like something to eat? If you can get them to say yes to that, and chances are they will probably say yes, you've broken down a barrier. You've turned them to a positive reaction instead of just no, 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 or no answer at all. And then from there, you can start to ask simple questions and give them time to think. Because when your brain is trying to calm down out of that survival mode and bring the rest of the functioning back on, honestly, it takes about 20 to 30 minutes to be able to really fully do that. Another thing that Pastor Joanna has said is trying gentle. You know, so often we have to be really firm, really strong. We would resort to raising our voice to be above the level of the kids. But when you're in a one-on-one situation, try to be gentle with it and saying things like, I want to help understand. If you can talk to me about this, we can figure it out together. Just letting the kids know that you're on their side, that you're going to advocate for them. And then if you say something like that, like, you know, I really respect you, and I am so glad that you can respect me and share how you're feeling, but I can't do anything unless I know. So if you want to talk to me, I'm here, and if you don't want to talk about it, you don't have to. That's respectful to the child, gives them space, and it gives them a choice to be able to talk or not. Probably a lot of situations arise because they don't have control. Giving them control over their choices, it's great. We could talk about more of those tools, or more about how you have a conversation if that interests anyone. Or a really practical example of a conversation that I've had, just let me know if that would be helpful. All right, let's talk some fun stuff here. So something we've started doing lately in the elementary preschool area is I can control my reaction. Bump, hill, and mountain. A bump is a bummer, but I know what I can do. It's not what I wanted, but I can move on from it. A hill is kind of a medium problem. I might feel confused, frustrated. I might have to ask my friend for help. A mountain is a problem where I am so angry, I might even cry. I need to talk about it. I think I might need an adult's help. So this chart can help kids understand the size of their problem and the size of their reaction. We've talked to them before. If your size of your problem doesn't match the size of your reaction, then you need to talk to someone, because if you have a mountain reaction to something that you know is a bump, there's something else that's going on. I can think about, kids who have just had one after another thing happen to them, and finally, maybe they break their pencil or their crayon breaks as they're coloring, and they just blow. They totally blow up. Well, that was a bump problem that they had a mountain reaction to, but there's a reason that they had that reaction. We're trying to teach this as a way that kids can understand what they're feeling, why they're feeling it, a way for them to look at themselves and say, I can take charge of my reactions. I can control what I do because of these problems. So I encourage you to use the language of Bump Hill Mountain with the kids. When, they're having a hard time with something, they're really accepting if you ask them, hey, what do you think? Is this a bump, a hill, or a mountain? We've done some identifying activities so that kids can understand. And really right now we're in that beginning stage of them being able to identify the size of their problem. And then we're going to move towards being able to identify the size of their reaction. And then we're going to move into tools for them to bring their reaction into line. But right now, we're just focusing on, hey, I saw that so-and-so pushed you out of your seat, and you're having a hard time. Are you having a hard time with that? Okay, well, is it a bump, a hill, or a mountain? What can we do? And eventually, we're already seeing it. We've done it for about a month now. I'm seeing kids being able to voice that they're frustrated or confused or upset about something, whereas previously that had been a triggering thing for them. They'd have to, do the fight, flight, or freeze. This is going to help to regulate that more so that you have less kids trying to leave the room, less kids having big tantrums, so that they can take charge of their own reaction. It's really empowering for them. So that's all I have for you today. I'm going to link the triggering event, behavior, and then solutions from 123 Care. That's specifically for kids under, I think, 5 or 6, but it can apply to all of our kids. So I hope that helps you understand trauma a little bit more. Let me know if you have any questions or any comments. And when you get done watching this, please send me an email and say, hey, I watched it, just so I can keep track of my records, who's gotten to see this and who hasn't yet. All right.